Took him 5 days to get back in the store. When he got back there, it was just absolutely devastating. Over $500,000 of wasted inventory. All of the cash registers, all the computers, gone. While there was no structural damage, most of the things inside of there were going to have to be torn out and replaced. He searched his records and he found out that he had every type of insurance there was except flood insurance. It was devastating. But then he recalled one of the lessons that he had just been taught in this leadership conference. That it's not what happens to you that makes the difference, it's what happens in you. And he said, I'm going to make the most of this situation. I've got 80 people who work at my store. I've got an entire community that depends upon me for their food. And I'm not going to let them down. When they were finally able to get back in that store, he got all his employees together. They spent 16 days literally working around the clock. 22 truckloads of garbage, spoiled food, stuff that had to be hauled out. He ordered new stuff. It cost him over $1 million to restock that store. But 21 days after that flood happened, they reopened. 80 people went back to work. An entire community received the hope that they could recover from this as well. In this process, Mr. Horn learned to trust God. He learned to face adversity. He learned to remain optimistic in the spite of incredible adversity and difficulty. He learned how to rally and inspire others. He learned how to rally and inspire an entire town. And because of everything he learned going through that, and the prominent role that he was given because of that, he began to get invitations to become a motivational speaker. And today, he travels the country, inspiring crowds to overcome adversity, control your inner world when you can't control the external world. And he is making the difference he always dreamed of, that he is now capable of making because of the things he learned when he went through trauma, adversity, and difficulty. This is what God wants to do to you and me when we suffer with the aftermath of betrayal. He wants to infuse in us the very strengths that we need to be able to fulfill the destiny he still has for us. This is how it worked with Joseph. Joseph's ultimate destiny was to be this political power, this nation saver. And you know what he was going to need to get that done? He was going to need great leadership ability to be able to cast vision for incredibly complex projects and inspire people to rally around him. He was going to need to be a manager, to know how to oversee and work with people so that they together can get a job done. He was going to need to learn how to deal with setbacks and adversity and challenging people and get them to work together to accomplish a huge goal. Where was he going to learn all that stuff? He wasn't learning it at home when everything was going well. When he was the baby kid and the favored son with the silver spoon who got anything he wanted, he wasn't going to learn any of that stuff. But when he was sold into slavery and he became part of Potiphar's servants, and as he rose through the ranks, he learned how to lead, and he learned how to manage, and he learned how to strategize, and he learned how to deal with difficult people, and he learned how to deal with setbacks, and he learned all of those strengths. And when all came crashing down and he got thrown into prison, he learned every one of those lessons all over again. So that when the moment finally came that he ascended into political power, he had all the skills he needed to be successful in his destiny. Because God had built them into his life as he traveled this different pathway that sprung from betrayal but led to blessing. This is what God does in the aftermath of betrayal. He is preparing us for our destiny. And there's a final thing I think we learn from Joseph as well. And that is that God is positioning us. He's positioning us. Have you ever noticed that when you read the stories of political stars or Hollywood stars or music stars, that somewhere in their story, they always seem to get the big break? Have you ever noticed that? They were in the right place, at the right time, under the right circumstances, knowing the right people, and that set off a chain of events that led to them being thrust into their destiny, their dream, their ambition. Years and years ago, there was a high school student in Illinois who was not a good student and not very popular. He was bullied virtually every day at his high school. You find out what his classmates really thought about him when his senior year they voted him least likely to succeed. Wouldn't you love to have that award on your resume in your yearbook? Least likely to succeed. He went to college for about a year, took a drama class, that's the only thing he really liked, dropped out of school and said, I'm going to move to Hollywood and be a star. So he moved to Hollywood. He became part of a larger agency that placed aspiring talent where he earned a salary of $150 a week. He couldn't land a good role. He couldn't land a good part. He certainly couldn't make ends meet in California at $150 a week. So he became an apprentice and learned how to do carpentry. He became relatively good at it. And he began to get some carpenter jobs to earn enough money so he could make ends meet while he still tried to be an actor. Well, there was this up-and-coming filmmaker whose name was George Lucas. Maybe you've heard of him. And he had just bought a home that needed some renovation done in it, and so he hired this young man to come and build cabinets in his new home. George Lucas was actually so impressed with the carpentry job he did, and because he just kind of liked this guy's personality and his edginess, he said, you know what, I want to help you out. I'm going to be making this movie called Star Wars. And I'd like to hire you to come and build sets on this movie. And so we go, great, I can really use the money, I appreciate it. So he goes and he starts building sets for this Star Wars movie that's going to be made. One day, they were doing some casting for this movie, and people were reading lines. And George Lucas went over to this man and he said, you know what, I kind of like you. Why don't you come and read some lines for this guy? His name is Steven Spielberg. Just read some lines and just see what he has to think. So this carpenter, this aspiring actor, went over and sat down and he read some lines for Steven Spielberg. And Spielberg was so impressed with the way he did it that he said to George Lucas, you need to cast this guy. Well, what role should we give him? Spielberg says, Hans Solo would be perfect. And by now you probably figured out the guy's name is Harrison Ford. Right place, at the right time, under the right circumstances, knowing the right people that led to the big break. Whoa! It was perfect. Friends, do you realize that when we take this windy path that the aftermath of betrayal can send us on, that God is actually using that path not only to purify, not only to prepare, but also to position us, to get us in just the right place, in just the right time, under just the right circumstances, knowing just the right people, so that we can get our big break and enter into and fulfill our destiny. That's what God is doing. That's how it worked with Joseph.